Boom, I'm in the room. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're watching from. Now, I'm your host, Lord Heale, and we're coming to you live from the old Heale Manor. Now, I have a guest on this evening. Now, we haven't done one of these for a little while, but we're going to do a little bit of a chat this evening. And we're going to be talking suicide, but we're going to talk about it from a different point of view. So without too much further ado, I'm going to pull my guest in. So all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, Thomas, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tim. This is amazing to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Well, I've been looking forward to this. I haven't done one of these live for a few weeks because I've A, been away, but B, had several that's been dropping that were pre-recorded. So it's nice to be live again. So Thomas, tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, it's quite, it's not unique, and many people have been through similar to what you have. But
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've got to deal with your suicide in the family? So the
Yeah,
platform's yours.
yeah. Thank you. So I lost my brother Mark in 2001 to suicide. He was 6 years older than me. Um, I would like to. I can't really say that like his suicide, um, gave me depression or anything like that. It was definitely a trauma and one that I had to process. I was 24 years old. I was very lost in as a young man. Didn't have much direction. I knew what I wanted. I had a lot of passion for different things, especially film and video production. But the cross I had to bear was codependency. I was super codependent, and usually to the most toxic people. So um, I struggled a lot with chasing down my passion. And when I lost my brother, that kind of just sent me in a tailspin. It was the last drop in the bucket. So for about a decade, I had my ups and downs of traversing my trauma and my grief and trying to understand it, having small victories, but many defeats and many setbacks. And after finally finding my way into a therapist's office in 2008, I was well on my way of like understanding some of my um, the issues that I was dealing with, like with my codependency. I learned a lot more about why I respond and why I act emotionally to experiences and to situations. So I was really able to I had help with my therapist Kim to unpeel the onion that is me. And in 2010, I met somebody who had also lost a loved one to suicide. His name is Zach, and he was for the first person that I'd ever um, met outside of my family in my own experience that had lost somebody to suicide. And having just one person, my community, grow by one of somebody that knew exactly how I could be feeling or what I have experienced was very profound. And then one fateful evening in the summer of 2010, Zach and I had a conversation over a beer about doing a cross country bike ride to honor our brothers and, more importantly, learn from other people who had lost their loved ones to suicide. So that's what we did in 2012. We set off on our collective 7,000-mile cross country journey. We started at the northern edge of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, uh, and we made our route was a giant W through the country. We did not do a straight line, and we ended up ending our bike ride at an art retreat center in Wappingers Falls, New York, by the name of the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. The Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, or COSM, is run by artists uh, Alex and Allison Gray. They were considered visionary artists, um, and a lot of their art is inspired by psychedelic journeys that they had been on. And Alex himself has created some of the most beautiful pieces of art that I've ever seen. And I'm a big fan of art, and I'm a big fan of creating art, my own stuff. I do photography in the written word. Um, so it was just a profound journey. I to ride our bikes across the country and learn from other people, um, learning the history of how support groups were created and how they had to tend with the stigma of suicide, learning tricks and trades from other individuals and how they processed their their trauma. Um, how friends and how communities responded to them after their loved one died by suicide. So it was a very interesting journey, not only for myself but to learn from the stories of others.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I mean, 7,000 miles on a push bike.
Yeah, well, we ended up having a
Um,
support vehicle. I don't want to
all
like
right.
make it. We did have a support vehicle, but we rode every single mile. Um, so it was important to have a support vehicle because when you're planning
Yeah.
events with other organizations, like they're very regimented. Their life goes on. So we
Mm.
need to, when they set a date, we need to be there by that date. And there were injuries that happened.
I mean,
Zach
how
had
many
a,
times did you get knocked off your bike? How many times did you
I,
did you did you pull a muscle? Um, how many? I mean, obviously after 7,000 miles on a push bike, your butt's going to be pretty tough.
oh, there's medicated cream for that. um, but funny enough, um, I only had one flat tire the entire ride, and it
Wow.
wasn't it wasn't going through the desert and getting a thorn. It wasn't through because the bikes that we had, they were road bikes, but they had mountain bike components to them. So there was a lot of times we had to go off roading, and it was never a time that we had to go off the road. It was me riding my bike through the French Quarter in New Orleans, and I went through a puddle, and there was a broken like alcohol bottle, and
Right.
that's what cut my tire. So we were like already thousands of miles into the
Into
tour
the
by the
journey
time,
anyway. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and then boom, like it was a
Came as
broken
a shocker,
alcohol
no doubt.
container. I was like, what? This
You thought your
sucks.
bike was
Um,
invincible.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was pretty close. Um, but yeah, it was an amazing experience, uh, amazing journey. I learned a lot about myself and other people.
Yeah.
So.
So you had a support vehicle. I mean, did that
Mhm.
follow you all the way, or did you pre-arrange
Yeah,
destinations where you'd meet it? How did you go
no,
about planning the trip out to start with, and how did you find the people that you needed to go and talk to?
Providence. A lot of it is left to Providence. So we had the conversation in June of 2010 to do it. We finally made the decision in February 2011. Like, yeah, we're going to do this. So from February, like mid February 2011, all the way to like March 1st is of 2012 was the planning. Like I
Mm.
cold call, I did research. We decided like we kind of had an idea of what our route wanted to be. And then we did our research of where some of the big activists were. And so that altered slightly our route. And then I did a massive cold calling of all the major cities and small towns that had crisis centers that I found through a mental health and suicide awareness community online portal, and I just cold called people. And some of those phone numbers didn't exist anymore, or the people
Mm.
that were attached to it weren't involved anymore. And so there was a lot of just, oh, you don't do it. Do you have a number of the person who does? And then just calling people over and over again, telling them what we were doing, asking them if they'd be interested in organizing their community to come and speak with us when we were in their town. And then I'd have to call them back to be like, this is the date that we think that this is the date that we'll be in your town. So like we had to know where we were going to be on what day, like at least 6 months before we even started.
Wow. So, I
Yeah, it
mean,
was,
that amount of planning to go into, I mean, I do trips myself. I've just come back from the North Coast 500, which is around the north of Scotland. It's a 500 mile from Inverness around the top of Scotland and back down and across to Inverness. I didn't do that last little bit because I came further south, but I started up the east coast and came down the west coast, doing it anti-clockwise. That took a lot of research and stuff where I was going to stop, where I was going to go, and the places I was going to visit, and a little bit of research on the places I was visiting. So I
yeah,
know how much planning goes into, and that was only 2,000 miles.
yeah. Well, to, when we started our bike ride, or when we started our journey, we still hadn't made contact with Alex or Allison Gray at the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. We just know that we wanted to, like, that was our destination of our
Yeah.
pilgrimage. And because of Alex he's a big advocate for the healing properties of art, either as an audience member or as the creator, and how it can help you process your own personal trauma and some of the stuff that you've been through in life. Um, so we would have liked them to know that we were coming, but we just hadn't made contact. There's a pretty big, you know, space between like their frontline people
Hmm.
and them. So
Yeah.
and the frontline people
So
get a lot of weird requests daily. So by the time we had started, we were like, you know, if it just turns out that we get there and we said, hey, we just got here from riding our bike 7,000 miles across the country, just thought you
yeah.
should know that this is where we were coming. Do you know of a hotel we can stay at? Luckily, we had a meeting with the head, not the head, but like the communications director for an organization called MAPS, also a multidisciplinary association of psychedelic studies. And they were kind of like a think tank that took information from different research around the world and kind of like sifted through it. And their big thing was trying to like get um, promote get the data and promote psychedelic usage in therapy for veterans, for people that are veterans suffering from PTSD, people that had terminally ill diseases, and helping them like accept the inevitability of death and other traumas. And so because the Greys are like psychedelic artists, they're very
Hmm.
connected with the psychedelic community. So the community director, the communications director at this organization was like, have you talked to the Greys? Do they know you're coming? And we're like, no, we haven't been able to get in touch with them. We're like, you guys, they're like, you guys are crazy. You're just going anyways. We're like, yeah, you know what I mean? It's not about like meeting with them. Like that would be cool if we could have a conversation with them, but it's really about the space that they've created. And
Mm.
he's like, well, I know them. I will send you an email. I will send them an email and vouch for you. And by the time we got back to Arizona, we started in San Francisco, went all the way down to LA, and then cut back through to Phoenix before we headed back out onto the road. By the time we got back to Phoenix, it was probably about 18, 20 days later. And I got an email from Brad and Allison Gray. And she said she was excited about our journey. They were very uh, open to having us show up, that they would have they had like a a Victorian estate there for their events, and people could rent rooms, and that they would give us a room for a couple of days for free. And
Wow.
yeah, so we knew, and then she put Allison put me connected me with her hospitality and program manager Sharon Steluto, and I just sent her emails once a month, hoping that they wouldn't forget about us.
Yeah. So how long did the journey take?
We left on March 1st, and we arrived at the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors on September 27th. But we could have gone, you can get across the country a lot faster than that. One, you
Oh,
do a straight line. Two, you don't have any scheduled events and you just do it. So we had these events, but I had done a walk previously, like 6 years earlier, with another organization for progressive Christians. I am not a Christian, but I believed in what they were doing, and I needed to change some things in my life. I would say that journey was one of the few victories that I had before I found therapy. And so I had an idea of how to do a journey like this. So you needed at least 2 days off where we're not riding. We needed recovery days. So I
yeah.
automatically built in 2 days off, and they weren't always back to back. Like you would have like
Mm.
a Sunday off and a Wednesday off. And then knowing that we were going to have emotionally charged conversations, it was good to have like maybe a week off in this town and a week off in that town. So knowing like we scheduled a few towns where we either had family, friends, or we made a really good connection with somebody on the first phone call, that they gave us, they recommended like, hey, why don't you stay here? So there was at least 5, maybe 6 cities that we took like at least 5 days off, and we just had
Mm.
massive recovery. So that's why it took so long. Not only did we do a giant W, but we
Yeah.
also had at least 5 cities where we had like at least 5 days off. There would have be some events in that 5 days, but a lot of it was just like recovery and resting not only our body but our minds from like, because
Yeah.
it got to the
Yeah, it's
point where
mind numbing just pedaling away every day. How many miles a day had you planned to cover? I mean, that's another big thing. It's the amount of miles that you can do in a day. I mean,
well
normally it's around about 100, isn't it?
no, we didn't even do 100. We would have blown past so many different places if we would have done that. Most of like the long distance took place between LA and Phoenix, and then Phoenix to Albuquerque. Once we got into once we got up into Nebraska, like we didn't have to ride as far, so we were doing like 65 miles a day. And what we would do is that we weren't riding as a team. We rode as a team in California, but because we had a support vehicle, we didn't. I wanted to raise enough money to have somebody to pay somebody to be our support vehicle, and to also make sure that they knew how to work a camera, because I had the intention of doing a documentary.
Hmm.
Um, we didn't raise that much money in the beginning, so I ended up having to take my own car. When we came back from California, I just I kind of like built in an extra vertical frame in the bed of my truck that we were able to like hang supplies from, and essentially like I would drive one day and Zach would ride, and then he would drive the next day and I would ride. But and I'm glad that we did that, because Zach got injured in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and wasn't able to ride his bike until Philly. So
Wow.
North Carolina, um,
So you did the lion's
Virginia,
share of the
Maryland.
riding then?
I did a lot of the riding. So, and then like because his back injury, he needed to get massages. We would like every few days we're finding a different masseuse that he could, and I'd be the one that was like, I rode my bike, and I'm like, you get the massage, you get the massage. I'll take a I'll take a cold bath, but like, I don't. We needed to do that so that he could get back on the bike. Otherwise,
Yeah.
he would have driven the last leg of it. And there was a
Mm.
time like I ended up getting diagnosed with diverticulitis, so I wasn't able to ride for a week because diverticulitis is like an infection in the intestines. Um,
Ooh.
like you have like little divots in your intestinal lining, so they can get infected. And when you're taking antibiotics, you usually need to eat a lot of food, but because it was my tummy that was the issue, I couldn't eat that much food. So my head was spinning from the antibiotics. I wasn't able to consume that many calories. There's only so much energy you get from drinking
Mm.
kefir and eating white bread for like 5 days.
Yeah.
So that was like 5 days that like I was on antibiotics and I couldn't ride. Like every time I tried to get on the bike, if I hit a bump, it just sent a shockwave through my intestines. It was like being stabbed. So
Yeah.
um, it was important to have the bike ride, to have the vehicle there. Um, but yeah, we probably only did about 65 miles a day after once we got to New Mexico, or once we got to Nebraska.
Yeah. Oh, it's not bad going. I mean, it's still quite a lick. I've done the London to Brighton bike ride a few times, and that's about 60 miles.
Yeah,
And I found that tough going. And I mean, this is going back 15 years, I suppose. The last one
yeah.
I did. I'm not getting any younger. Nowadays, I prefer to have a motor. But
One of these days,
um,
I've always had the desire to ride on a motorcycle. I haven't had the luxury yet to do so.
mm, um, so I mean, that's taking you several months to do 7,000 miles, which is quite a feat
Mhm.
in itself. And you said, did you manage to video it? Did you manage to record it, or a
We
lot
got
of
a
it?
lot. We got a lot of footage, but I was the one shooting most of it because I went to film school. I had like that vision.
Yeah,
Zach wasn't. He didn't have that. He didn't have that muscle. So it just got like, I didn't want to have to remind him all the time, but I still I did a lot of interviews. Like halfway through the bike ride, I knew it wasn't going to be a documentary and that it was probably going to be a book, but I still kept on interviewing people because I wanted to have the footage,
yeah,
and which was helpful because when I was writing the book, I went through, I watched footage of just scenery, and I watched footage of actual interviews. And so the scenery kind of like brought me back to those moments to help me like give, a little bit more creative or poetic descriptions of the environment. And then the interviews really helped me like capture, um, the emotion of the people that we interacted with. So
mm.
those interviews, even though I didn't use them for a film, were monumental in me telling a story through words, through the written word.
And the interviews. How did you record them? Were they audio? Were they video?
They were
Did
video.
you
They
use
were
did you
video.
use a 2 camera setup, a 3 camera setup, just
I had
on
one
a
tiny little
GoPro?
dinky camera. I had one little tiny little dinky handheld camera. I would like set it right to my shoulder. I would mic them. I would mic the person that I was interviewing, and then I would have them make eye contact with me, and I would ask them questions, and it was more of a conversational interviews. Who are they? What's their name? What's their profession? Who is the person that they lost? And then go back to tell me a little bit about the person that you lost, and then like what how did you find out? What was the day? What was that day like? Because like even
Mm,
now for me, like whenever we come to the anniversary of my brother's death, I could look at the clock and I could tell you exactly where I was on that day. And we just
mm,
had the 23rd anniversary of his death, and I could tell you exactly where I was
mm.
at any given time. I could tell you exactly where I was and what I was doing in that day. So
It is really, really tough losing somebody anyway, but losing them to suicide is even harder to understand. And
Yeah,
there's a
and
whole raft of emotions that you go through. There's disbelief, there's anger, there's all sorts of things, and and more often than not, you never saw it coming. You didn't know they was going to do it. They had no idea what what was going through their minds at the time.
I
Having
think we
gone
always
through
just
all of
want to
that, yeah,
I think we always just want to believe that like our that would never happen to us. That would never happen to our loved ones. Our loved one would never do that. I know a
yeah,
lot of people that had like anger and frustration with their loved ones, you know, because it's confusing because you're you're sad because of the person who's gone, but you're
yeah.
mad at the person because of the way in which they left, and the way in which they died. It was a surprise to me that my brother took his life, but I wasn't mad at him.
Mm,
I wasn't angry at him. I think I had more pity for him than anything else. Um, it's I mean it's a wild thing to think about. I you know even I couldn't have done the bike ride if I hadn't already come to terms with my brother's death.
yeah,
You know, coming to terms with my brother's death gave me the ability to sit with others and listen to their story and really kind of like hold space for them. And another thing that kind of blows my mind about the bike ride and even about my brother's death is what I found, the two things I found at the end of the journey. One is perspective and the other is a person. So the perspective I found, the person kind of exemplifies the perspective. So I'll share the perspective first. Is that, you know, the universe existence is made up by experiences. Whether it's a cosmic collision that even if we're not witnessing it, it's still an experience that happened. Sometimes they're physical collisions that we experience just in our interactions, and sometimes they're emotional experiences because of the thing that happened and how we respond to them emotionally. And what I'm about to say may sound callous. I don't mean it to be, but the universe does not care about our feelings. Now that doesn't mean that your feelings aren't valid and that you shouldn't express or feel your feelings, because I think you should. You can't, it's unhealthy to not process and feel your feelings. That's why they're there. Um, they're sensory receptor. They're sensory organs to like your experiences that you're having, and it's important for you to process them. That being said, it's our own egos that have to define an experience as good or bad. The universe doesn't care about it being good or bad. It just does
mm,
it. It's just an experience. So once you are able to move through and process your emotions, go through the dark forest of your emotions and come out on the other side, you really have a choice to become a victim of the experience or a student of the experience. And that's the perspective that I found. You know, if a victim will be like, why me? Why does this happen to me? Why does this always happen to me? Well, I don't deserve this, blah blah blah. A
mm,
student will be like, all right, that happened. What's the lesson? How do I evolve? How do I
yeah,
grow? And I would also state that like it's a privilege to have that perspective. A lot of
mm,
people are in survival mode, and it may take them longer to get to that point where they know that they can make that choice. To be able to make that choice is coming from a place of privilege. So I want to like make sure that people understand that it's hard. It's a hard journey to get to that choice, but once you do get there, it's a very important choice to make. That perspective: do I want to be a victim or a student? Now, the person that I found at the end of this bike ride that is exemplifies that perspective is Sharon Steluto, the my main contact that I was put in contact with by the Greys
Yeah.
for the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. Sharon is now sitting 12 years later. She's sitting in the other room, probably listening to me tell the story for like the 80th time. Uh, I was in charge of. I had most of the contacts. I made most of the contacts for every single place that we ended at, or that we had an event at. So I would call them. I would call them like a day or two before we arrived. It would usually be a 5 to 10 minute conversation, and we'd be done with that, and then I'd meet that person in person. Um, Sharon was different. We had an hour long conversation. It felt like I was reuniting or reconnecting with an old friend, and I really liked the sound of her voice. So, I hate to admit this, but I did it. But I Google stalked her to see what she looked like, and I was not disappointed. And so, um, she and I started a long distance relationship after the bike ride to see if a relationship. She lived 3,000 miles away from me, and we would visit each other every few months for about 2 years until I convinced her that you don't have to shovel sunshine. So she moved out here, and we've been living with each other for the past 10 years. It'll be 10 years in, we've been together for 10 years and 12 years in November, and 10 years in, no, we've already passed our 10 years of living together. So like her being a personification of that experience, of that perspective, is this: if my brother doesn't die by suicide, there's no reason for me to go on a cross country bike ride, let alone end at the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors where I meet her. So the thing about experience being experience is that a negative experience can lead you to something positive, just like a positive experience can lead you to something negative. And I wouldn't have Sharon in my life today. Like, how do I connect with this woman that I is like the love of my life when she's more than 3,000 miles away from me? We were separated by not only time, 10 years of time, and 3,000 miles of space. And it was this event that happened, this experience that happened in 2001, that set me on the trajectory, that changed the trajectory of my life. And little did I know that, like, 11 years from that moment, I would meet the love of my life because of that event.
Yeah.
So, it's like, just Sharon is every single time I see her. Every single time I see her, I give her a hug or give her a kiss, or when we go to bed at night, like, she is the embodiment of that perspective, and it's impossible for me to ignore it or forget it.
So, Thomas, tell us a little bit about your book and what's in it.
The book is called 2012: A Bicycle Odyssey, a 7,000-mile bicycle journey for suicide awareness and the healing power of art. I am a huge fan of story and storytelling. I'm a huge fan of pop culture. I adore Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. So the book is actually structured intentionally to Joseph Campbell's monomyth of the hero's journey. So each chapter is a step in his explanation of the hero's journey. So it's 17 chapters numerically, with like an epilogue and a prologue and an introduction. But I would say, like, if you've lost somebody to suicide, there's a thread in there for you. If you love the idea of traveling across a great distance, beatnik style, there's a thread in there for you. If you you know are kind of open to the idea of a mystical experiences in life, there's a thread in there for you. And if you're a big pop culture nerd, there's a thread in there for you. And if you like all four of those things, then the book is for you. So there's a lot. It's all about, like, the loss of my brother, coming up with the idea for the bike ride, organizing the bike ride, the journey itself, and then most importantly, the journey home to share the thing that I learned with my community.
So where can people get the book?
You can go to my website, risephoenix.org. On there, you'll find links to all of my social media. You'll find a link to the book. The book is sold through Amazon. And you'll also come across a link to some old podcasts that I've done. There's one that is like conversational interviews. There's like over 300 episodes of that. And the one that I'm working on recently is called Stages. And it's more of an audio diary where I just check in every 2 weeks and talk about what it's like to be a middle-aged white guy who takes care of his father and deals with his own mental health while he's slowly aging.
We all know that aging process. And is the book available in audio? If
not yet. I've thought about doing it. It's all it's available. It's available in paperback. Where am I? Paperback and digital. You can get a digital copy and read it if you like that. I have all the gear that I need to make an audio book. I'm having a meeting with a buddy of mine who's a sound engineer, and I'm going to ask him what it would take, how much he costs for his services. So it's definitely on the radar. It's just one of those things I dedicated so much time to that I've started writing my next series of books.
And who would you like to narrate it, or would you like to do it yourself?
I think I would probably, I would just have to stay away from coffee and cream and make sure I'm just drinking some tea, some honey lemon water and make sure my throat is okay. And I think it'd probably be better if I was going to do an audio book, I would probably do the narration, and then I would ask my friend who's also the audio engineer to he makes ambient music. I think it would be beautiful to like have ambient music in between chapters, to give it more of a radio drama feel to it.
Sounds like a good plan. Well, Thomas, that's an amazing story, and I mean, it's an amazing feat to actually complete a journey that sort of distance, particularly on a push bike, and and suffering injuries and everything else that goes with it. So, thank you so much for sharing that.
I appreciate you having me. I'm glad. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to chat with you and your audience.
No, thanks a lot. Well, that's some story, isn't it? That is a story and a half. 7,000 miles on a push bike across America. 21 states he went through. 21 states. That's amazing. And I've just done around the UK, 2,000 miles on a motorbike. That was fun. Anyway, hopefully we're going to be back at it again soon. Until then, thanks for listening. TTFN. Ta-ta for now.